He married her on a dare, but what she revealed on their last day together changed his life forever, the game he should never have played. Liam Prescott had never known what it felt like to lose. Born into luxury and raised on applause, he was the kind of man who closed billion-dollar deals in tailored suits and walked into rooms knowing eyes would follow. The kind of man who never questioned whether he was in control, because he always was. At 35, Liam was CEO of a private equity firm so aggressive it made headlines weekly. He lived in a penthouse in Tribeca with floor-to-ceiling glass, owned 3 vacation homes he barely visited, and dated women so polished they often blended into each other. No drama, no mess, no complexity, just curated perfection. Until the night of the charity gala at the Astoria. The night everything began to change. It started over cocktails and arrogance. His old college friend, Marcus Raines, now a venture capitalist with a wicked sense of humor, watched Liam hold court at the rooftop bar, laughing with models, closing a deal between sips of whiskey. And then, with a smirk, Marcus leaned in and said, "You know, I bet there's one thing you still can't buy." Liam chuckled, not even turning. "Try me." "A woman's love," Marcus said simply. "A real one, not the kind that comes with brand deals and Instagram tags." Liam finally turned to him, amused. "So now you're preaching romance?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm proposing a game, a real one." And then came the bet. You marry someone who's not your type, not your aesthetic, no fashion models, no influencers, someone real, unfiltered. Let's see how long your confidence lasts when you can't charm her with yachts and money. Liam raised an eyebrow. "And the prize?" Marcus grinned. "My LA estate, 5 bedrooms, ocean view." Liam smirked. "And the catch? You stay married for 3 months, no cheating, no walking away, and you can't tell her it's a bet." Liam stared into his glass, then, without even blinking, said, "Deal." It wasn't about the house. It was about the thrill, the challenge, and the ridiculous assumption that any woman could resist him for long. He didn't know her name yet, but that would come soon enough. 2 weeks later, Marcus sent him a file. Her name was Aria Delgado, a poet, a bookshop assistant, plus size, curly hair, no filters. Her photos weren't posed, just candid shots of her reading, laughing, lost in thought. And Liam's first thought? This is too easy. He didn't expect to hesitate when he saw her in person, but he did. It was a Thursday afternoon. She was at Riverside Park, feeding ducks by the edge of the lake, wearing a sweater too big for her and glasses slightly tilted on her nose. She wasn't checking her phone, she wasn't taking selfies, she was just there, present, calm. And for the first time in years, Liam felt nervous. He didn't approach that day, just watched from a distance. The next time he made sure to walk by, coincidentally. She was reading a hardcover copy of a classic, Jane Eyre, her favorite, according to the notes Marcus had included. He pretended to drop his phone near her bench. "Sorry," he said, picking it up and glancing at her book. "Bronte?" She looked up slowly, not smiling, not fawning. "Yes. You know it?" "I read it years ago," he said. "Didn't like Rochester." Her brow lifted. "Most people don't. But he grows, kind of." Liam smiled. She didn't. "I'm Liam." "Aria," she said, then turned back to her book. He waited, but she didn't say more. It was humbling, and it pulled him in like a tide. Over the next week, he kept appearing. At the bookstore where she worked, at the same cafe she frequented every morning at 9:15. Always subtle, never pushy, just present. And she noticed. But she didn't flirt, didn't soften. She was polite, brief, guarded. Until one evening, when he found her sitting alone on the bookstore steps, her eyes red. A small torn envelope sat on her lap. He approached quietly. "Bad day?" he asked gently. She looked up. "My landlord just raised my rent. Again." "Can't your bookstore salary cover it?" he asked too casually. She gave him a look, sharp, dry. "Do you know what bookstore clerks make, Liam?" He shrugged. "I have an idea." "You don't," she said. "But that's okay. You probably don't need to." That honesty, it stung more than it should have. He sat down beside her. "Do you want a drink?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Only if it's cheap." They ended up in a small bar near 81st, sharing fries and bad wine. That night, Aria laughed for the first time, and Liam noticed how her eyes crinkled when she did. how she quoted obscure authors mid-sentence, how she wasn't trying to impress anyone, least of all him. And he liked it. Too much. The next few weeks passed in a blur of rain-soaked walks, late-night calls, shared poems under blankets. She took him to hole-in-the-wall diners, to poetry slams in Brooklyn basements, to art galleries where the paintings weren't famous, but meaningful. She told him about her dreams, about her mom's cooking, about the manuscript she was too scared to submit anywhere. And Liam listened, more than he ever had. He started showing up early, bringing her favorite muffins, leaving sticky notes inside her books. He even bought a second-hand paperback and underlined his favorite lines, just to give it to her. He wasn't acting anymore, and that terrified him, because the deeper he fell, the more the secret of the bet poisoned him. Each time she smiled, he felt guilt wrapped tighter around his chest. He wanted to tell her. He couldn't. Not yet. So instead, he asked her the question that would change everything. They were sitting on her tiny fire escape, sipping tea from chipped mugs. The city hummed below them, and Liam turned to her. "Marry me." She laughed. Thought he was joking. He didn't smile. "I'm serious." She stared at him, confused, searching. "You don't know me." "I'm learning," he said. "This is sudden. I don't want to wait." She shook her head slowly. "Why? Why would someone like you want someone like me?" He took her hand, held it tight. "Because you make me honest, and I've never had that before." Silence. Then, "Okay." He kissed her forehead, and inside, something cracked, because she was saying yes to a man he wasn't. Not yet, not fully, but he wanted to be. Their wedding was a whisper. Just them. A courthouse. A bouquet from a corner bodega. She wore a green dress that hugged her softly. He wore no tie, just a promise in his eyes. She looked radiant. He looked terrified, not of the commitment, of the truth he still hadn't told her. That night, as she curled into his side, murmuring dreams into his neck, Liam lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hating the man he used to be, and praying she'd love the one he was becoming, even after everything, even when she learned what he had done, the love that wasn't meant to grow. Liam had never lived with someone before, not really. Sure, he'd had women sleep over, stay for weekends, even travel with him for months at a time, but living with someone like Arya? That was something else entirely. Because Arya didn't just fill the space, she changed it. Within a week, his sterile penthouse, all chrome and cold minimalism, had been transformed into something warmer. A book here, a plant there, a jar of homemade jam in the fridge, a candle that smelled like vanilla and old pages. Arya didn't ask permission, she simply existed, and her presence seeped into the corners of his life like light through drawn curtains. Liam didn't fight it. He let her rearrange the furniture in the living room because conversation flows better when the chairs face each other. He let her move his espresso machine to a lower counter because not everyone's 6'2", you know. And he let her turn the guest room into a writing nook, with string lights, floor cushions, and a vintage typewriter he didn't even remember owning. Each change chipped away at the armor he'd built over years, slowly, gently, but deeply. It terrified him, not because he didn't like it, but because he liked it too much. Arya was becoming home, and Liam had never believed in homes. One night she found an old photo album tucked away in the back of a drawer. It was dusty, untouched, filled with images of a boy with sad eyes and expensive clothes. Liam tried to shrug it off. That was before. Before what? She asked. Before I decided feelings were optional, he replied. Arya stared at one of the photos. A younger Liam with his mother, unsmiling. The woman's posture was rigid, her eyes distant. You were lonely even then, she whispered. He didn't respond, just closed the album and changed the subject. But the truth lingered. Because Arya wasn't like the others. She didn't pry. She waited. And somehow, that made him want to tell her everything, except the one thing he still couldn't. The bet. That horrible, shameful bet. It clung to his conscience like smoke in a sealed room. Every time she kissed at him, every time she said, I'm glad I met you. He heard Marcus's voice in his head. You're playing the game well, Prescott. But it didn't feel like a game anymore. It felt like guilt, raw, relentless. And then, something happened that made it worse. Arya brought up the idea of family. They were lying in bed, the city lights casting shadows on the ceiling, when she said it softly, almost like she was testing the waters. "Do you ever think about kids?" Liam stiffened. "Now?" he asked carefully. "No, not now. I always imagined being a mom someday." She smiled to herself, a distant, dreamy smile. "I know I don't look like the women in parenting ads, but I'd like to raise a child who knows they're loved, unconditionally." Liam swallowed hard. "You'd be a great mom." She turned to him, her hand resting on his chest. "Would you be a good dad?" He hesitated, and that pause, just a second too long, made her pull back slightly. "Sorry," she said quickly. "That was probably too soon." "No," he replied. "I just never thought about it seriously. But I could, with you." He meant it, but the lie beneath it poisoned the moment. Because how could he talk about children, about forever, when their beginning had been built on a dare? He had to tell her, he knew that. But every time he looked at her, truly looked at her, the way her eyes sparkled when she read something beautiful, the way she hummed while cooking, the way she touched his arm mid-sentence without noticing, he lost the courage. He was falling in love. And that made everything worse, because it wasn't just his guilt anymore. It was fear. Fear that telling the truth would destroy the one thing in his life that felt real. But lies have sharp edges, and they always cut when you least expect it. One afternoon, Arya came home early from the bookstore. Her shift had been canceled due to a leak in the ceiling. She walked into the penthouse, humming, arms full of groceries, ready to surprise Liam with dinner. He wasn't home, but his laptop was open, and the notification was still there. An email from Marcus. Subject: Bet update, day 56. You owe me dinner if she lasts another week. Arya froze. She read it once, then twice, then again. Her heart stopped. The groceries fell to the floor. Tomatoes rolled under the counter. A bag of pasta burst open like something symbolic, but she didn't notice. She was staring at the screen like it had just ended her world, because it had. Everything crashed at once. The cafe dates, the flowers, the whispered promises, the morning coffees, the green dress, the wedding vows. All a lie? Her breath came short and fast. Her throat tightened. She felt her legs shake beneath her. She couldn't cry. Not yet. She just sat on the kitchen stool, staring at the screen, trying to convince herself she was wrong. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. Maybe it was an old email, a prank. But deep down, she knew. And when Liam walked through the door 20 minutes later, smiling and talking about dinner reservations, she didn't say a word. She just looked at him, and something inside her snapped. Not loudly, not with screams, but with silence. Cold. Final. She picked up the email, printed it, and placed it on the table. Then she walked to the bedroom, packed a single bag, and left. Liam didn't chase her. Not at first. Because he didn't understand. Not yet. But when he saw the paper, when he read the email he had forgotten to delete, his knees buckled, and the truth hit like a car crash. He had lost her, not because she found out, but because he hadn't told her first. Because he had chosen comfort over courage, cowardice over honesty, and now she was gone. Lucas hadn't felt this unbalanced in years. The man who once made billion-dollar decisions before breakfast was now spending his nights pacing the halls of his penthouse, haunted by thoughts of a woman who didn't fall for his usual tactics, a woman who didn't care for the lifestyle he had flaunted like a trophy, and it both irritated and intrigued him in equal measure. Chloe Richards had become more than a curiosity. She was now a mystery he couldn't solve. 2 weeks into their marriage, Lucas realized something strange was happening to him. He was beginning to look forward to the quiet moments, the simple ones, the way Chloe hummed to herself while cooking oatmeal in the morning, how she curled up with a book by the window, completely at peace, as if the rest of the world didn't matter, how she ignored his designer suits and luxury watches and instead asked about his last real friendship or the last time he cried. No one had ever done that, and it was terrifying. It started small. Lucas, used to grand gestures and luxury, began trying to impress her with smaller things. He remembered she liked poetry, so he ordered a rare edition of Maya Angelou's works and left it at her bedside. He noticed she skipped breakfast some mornings, so he started making her toast with peanut butter and banana, leaving it quietly on the counter. She never thanked him, but she also never ignored the gestures, and that, somehow, kept him going. One evening, after a long, fruitless board meeting, Lucas came home exhausted. He found Chloe in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, kneading dough with practiced patience. The smell of something warm and comforting filled the air, something Lucas hadn't experienced since his childhood. "What is that?" he asked, genuinely curious. Chloe didn't even look up. "Sourdough. It's been rising since this morning. My mother used to make it when things were tight. Bread was cheap and filling." Lucas leaned against the counter, watching her work. "You didn't have to do this," she shrugged. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because I needed to do something with my hands today. It clears my head." He watched the way her fingers folded and pressed, folded and pressed. She didn't flinch from the physicality of it. There was a strength in her that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with resilience. "You know," he said after a long pause, "you're the first person in a long time who makes me feel like a human being." Chloe looked up then, her eyes meeting his for a beat longer than usual. "Then maybe it's time you figured out what kind of human being you want to be." The words weren't cruel, they weren't accusatory, they were honest. And for the first time in years, Lucas didn't have an answer ready. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the empire he'd built, how much of it was real, and how much of it was just armor, thinking about the bet, about Chloe, about whether he was really the man he wanted the world to believe he was. Days passed. Lucas kept doing small things, not because he wanted to win, not anymore, but because doing them made him feel like he was building something real. For the first time, he didn't want to win the bet. He wanted to deserve Chloe's respect. One evening, she found him in the study, sitting alone in front of a notebook. "You write now?" she asked, half teasing. Lucas closed the notebook quickly. "Trying to, yeah." She tilted her head. "What about?" He hesitated. Then quietly, "About the person I used to be, and the person I think I might want to become." Chloe didn't respond immediately. But later that night, Lucas found her favorite mug placed next to his on the kitchen counter, with a note. "Tea tastes better when you're not lying to yourself." He smiled for a long time. As spring gave way to summer, something shifted between them. They began sharing meals more often, not just eating together, but cooking together. Chloe taught him how to sauté vegetables properly. Lucas surprised her by knowing how to dice onions without crying, a skill he picked up during a charity cooking event years ago. She teased him about it, and he teased her back. The tension between them softened. One afternoon, they took a walk through Central Park. It was Chloe's idea. She wanted fresh air, and Lucas, to his own surprise, had agreed. No paparazzi followed them, no suits, no filters. Just a man and a woman, walking among trees, talking about everything but themselves. They ended up sitting by the lake, watching the ducks. "You know," Lucas said quietly, "when I first agreed to this bet, I thought I was clever, arrogant even. I thought I'd win easily." Chloe smiled, not looking at him. "And now?" He looked at her, truly looked at her. "Now I think I didn't even know what the game was." Silence settled between them. Then Chloe said, "I didn't come into this thinking it would change me either. But here we are." Lucas turned toward the water. "Here we are." He reached over slowly, uncertainly, and to his surprise, Chloe let him hold her hand. No cameras, no contracts, no games, just warmth, a beginning. The silence between Noah and Grace grew lighter with each passing day, as if the invisible wall slowly cracked to let in threads of light. Gone were the mornings of silent coffee and cold distance. Instead, they now exchanged simple greetings, small smiles, and brief yet meaningful glances that lingered just long enough to suggest something unspoken. Noah had changed, not with grand gestures or declarations, but in the quiet ways that revealed a man trying to understand not just the woman in front of him, but himself. Grace noticed. How could she not? He no longer filled the space with meaningless conversation. Instead, he listened. He noticed when she seemed tired and started cooking dinner, fumbling through cookbooks with comedic determination. He left thoughtful notes with her favorite quotes, and perhaps most telling of all, he no longer asked for anything in return. One morning, Grace found a yellow envelope taped to the fridge with her name written in simple, uneven handwriting. Inside was a handwritten list titled, "Things I've Never Told You." She unfolded the list, her hands trembling slightly. Her eyes scanned through confessions that startled her, not because of their content, but because they were so honest. I'm scared of failure. I don't know what real love is, but I want to learn. I've never had someone look at me the way you do. It terrifies me. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sat down at the kitchen table, the list pressed to her chest. In that moment, she saw not the arrogant man who once married her on a cruel bet, but a man trying, and for the first time, failing on purpose if it meant becoming better. Later that evening, Grace stepped onto the rooftop terrace, where Noah stood leaning on the railing, staring at the city skyline. She held the yellow note in her hand, her voice soft as she approached. "You wrote this?" He turned, startled, but didn't deny it. "Yeah, I didn't know how else to say it." She smiled faintly, stepping beside him. "You're learning." They stood there in silence, the kind that didn't beg to be filled. The days that followed were nothing short of surprising. Grace invited Noah to one of her community art workshops. It was something she had kept separate from him, from that world of glamour and business deals he came from. But something told her he needed to see it, not just for her, but for himself. Noah hesitated but agreed. That Saturday morning, he arrived at a modest, sunlit studio nestled between a flower shop and a used bookstore. Inside, the smell of paint and clay hung in the air, and the room buzzed with laughter and gentle chatter. Children ran around with hands covered in color. Elderly women carefully molded sculptures of their memories. A teenage boy, shy and awkward, asked Grace if his brushstrokes were too weird. Noah stood awkwardly by the doorway, clearly out of his element. Grace watched, half amused, half curious. "Here," she said, handing him a smock. "You don't have to say anything. Just try." And he did, slowly, clumsily, but sincerely. By the end of the day, his hands were stained with blue paint, his shirt ruined, but he had laughed harder than he had in years. One of the children tugged his sleeve and asked if he'd come back next week. That night, Grace watched him fall asleep on the couch, an empty mug in his hand and paint still under his fingernails. She realized something important. He wasn't pretending, not anymore. Weeks passed. Their conversations grew deeper. They debated books, shared music, and argued over the best way to cook rice. Grace found herself looking at Noah with less caution and more curiosity. Was it possible that something real had begun to grow from something so shallow? And then came the unexpected moment. Noah was standing in front of the mirror, buttoning a crisp shirt for an important client dinner. Grace leaned against the doorframe, watching him quietly. He turned and saw her smile. "What?" he asked, adjusting his cuff. "You used to look in the mirror and see a winner," she said. "Now you look and wonder who you are. That's progress." Noah froze. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. "You see too much." "I've always seen too much," she replied. "But you never let me in." That night over dinner, Noah surprised Grace by introducing her to his client not as my wife or a +1, but as Grace, the artist who taught me how to see. The client, a poised woman in her 60s, looked at Grace with admiration. "Well," she said, lifting her glass, "sounds like you've got yourself a real education, Mr. Sinclair." He laughed, and for the first time it wasn't a laugh for show. It was genuine. It was his. But just as things began to feel steady, a ghost from the past returned. Jack, the friend who started it all, the one who made the bet. He called out of the blue, asking to meet. They sat at a dimly lit bar, just like old times. But this time, everything felt different. "So," Jack smirked, "6 months is almost up. Ready to collect your prize?" Noah didn't answer right away. He stared into his drink, his jaw tightening. "There is no prize," he said finally. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Come on, man. A deal's a deal." Noah looked up, eyes hard. "She's not a deal. She's not a bet. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And if you can't understand that, then maybe we were never friends to begin with." Jack scoffed. "You're serious?" "For the first time in my life, yeah." He left the bar that night without looking back. When he returned home, Grace was asleep on the couch, a sketchbook resting on her lap. Noah sat beside her quietly, then gently took her hand. He didn't need to say anything. In that moment, it was clear. The game was over. And somehow, love had won. The breaking point. The silence in the penthouse was a strange one. Not the heavy, cold silence of resentment that had cloaked their first weeks of marriage, but a new, uncertain one. It was the quiet of change. Lucas could sense it like a shift in the air. Chloe was no longer looking at him like he was the enemy. Her eyes, which had once been shields, were now windows, still guarded, but sometimes vulnerable, open. And that terrified him more than her anger ever had. Each day he tried to hold on to that sliver of hope. He continued with the small gestures. Her morning tea, left just how she liked it. Quiet, attentive dinners where he asked about her work and actually listened. He even started accompanying her on weekend volunteer trips to the women's shelter downtown, where Chloe mentored young girls who had lost direction in life. It was during one of these trips that Lucas began to see just how extraordinary Chloe was. She wasn't just kind, she was powerful in her kindness. He watched her gently coax a withdrawn teenage girl named Nia into talking about her art. He saw the way the girl's face lit up when Chloe praised her sketchbook and promised to fund her art supplies. Lucas had spent years in boardrooms and luxury lounges, surrounded by people who smiled with their teeth and lied with their eyes. But Chloe was real, through and through. She had depth, heart, conviction. She didn't just give, she inspired. That night, after their visit to the shelter, Lucas found himself unable to sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, his chest heavy with a strange ache. For the first time, he wasn't sure who he was without his mask of power and pride. Was he even worthy of her? The next morning, Chloe found him in the kitchen cooking breakfast. "You're up early," she said, her voice still groggy from sleep. Lucas looked up, spatula in hand. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep. Figured I'd try pancakes instead of eggs. Thought you might want to try something different." She raised an eyebrow, then offered a small smile. "Trying new things, huh? That's rare for you." "Maybe I'm trying to be rare," he said, and there was something in his voice, tender, honest, that made Chloe pause. She sat at the counter, accepting the plate he offered. They ate quietly, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was domestic, almost peaceful. And for a while, Lucas let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could fix everything. But the past doesn't just fade because we want it to. One rainy afternoon, Lucas returned from a business meeting to find Chloe in the study, staring at a box on the desk. A small beat-up box he had never seen before. She didn't notice him at first. Her fingers trembled as she held an old photograph in her hand. Lucas stepped forward. "Chloe?" She looked up, startled. Her expression was unreadable. "Where did you find that?" he asked softly. "It was in the closet behind your old files," she said. Her voice wasn't angry, just quiet. Lucas's stomach dropped. He knew exactly what was in that box. It held records from his early career. Deal memos, takeover strategies, cold, calculated moves he had once been proud of. And among them, a folder labeled Richards & Co. Chloe held the file in her hands. "You wrote the plan to bankrupt my father's company," she said, eyes fixed on the paper. "You signed every order, negotiated every clause. This wasn't just business. It was a blueprint for destruction. Chloe, please." "You didn't just ruin him," she said, rising from the chair. "You annihilated everything, and you did it for profit." Lucas's mouth went dry. "I didn't know it was your father." "But you knew he was a person," she snapped. For the first time in weeks, her voice cracked with rage. "You knew he had employees, a family. You knew what it would mean to shut that company down." Lucas stepped forward, but she stepped back. "You said you changed, Lucas. You made all these promises. But it was all a game to you. You played with lives like pieces on a chessboard, and mine was just another pawn." "It's not a game anymore," Lucas shouted. "Chloe, I didn't know. Back then I didn't care. But I do now. I swear to you I care. About you. About everything I ruined." She stared at him, chest heaving. "You didn't ruin a company. You ruined a little girl's entire world." Lucas felt like he couldn't breathe. "Tell me what to do. Please. Anything. I'll do it." Chloe's voice dropped to a whisper. "You can't bring him back. You can't undo what happened. But you can leave. Right now." The words hit him like a slap. "What?" "Leave. Go to your other penthouse, your other life. If your remorse is real, prove it by giving me space. Let me process this without you hovering, trying to fix it." Lucas didn't move. He just stood there, numb. "Please, Lucas," she said, her voice breaking. "Just go." And so he did. Lucas left the penthouse that night. He drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windshield. He didn't go to his other apartment. He checked into a cheap hotel with peeling wallpaper and broken lamps. It felt like punishment, and maybe that's what he needed. Days passed. Chloe didn't call. He didn't blame her. Instead, he threw himself into something new, rebuilding. Not his image or his career, but the lives he had shattered. He started reaching out to more families affected by his early business deals. Some slammed the door in his face. Others accepted his apologies with tears, confusion, or relief. He created a new fund, dedicated to supporting the small businesses he had once decimated. He didn't name it after himself. He didn't even speak at the launch event. He just signed the checks. And in the quiet moments, in that rundown hotel, Lucas kept a journal, page after page of apologies he would never send, things he wished he could say to Chloe. Meanwhile, Chloe stayed in the penthouse. The space felt different without Lucas there. Too quiet, too still. She tried to focus on her work, her girls at the shelter, her painting. But every corner of the place reminded her of something. A flower left on the windowsill, a note stuck on the fridge, a laugh they'd shared over a failed pancake recipe. And though she didn't want to admit it, she missed him. But could she forgive him? One night, she found his journal. He hadn't taken it with him. It had been left, tucked behind the bed frame. She didn't mean to read it. She really didn't. But her hand moved before her mind could stop it. What she found inside changed everything. Each entry was raw, vulnerable, and painfully honest. Regret, guilt, hope, fear, love. I broke her. I didn't mean to, but I did. She deserves more than a man learning to be decent. She deserves peace. I'd give up everything if it meant she could sleep without pain again. Chloe closed the journal and held it to her chest, tears running silently down her cheeks. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive him, but maybe she was ready to talk. The following weeks at the mansion were unlike anything either Hayden or June had ever anticipated. After the explosive confrontation with his friends, Hayden found himself in a storm of reflection. Something within him had shifted irrevocably. The bet, once a cruel joke, had now evolved into a moral reckoning. He had glimpsed something rare in June, a kindness that wasn't performative, a confidence that didn't stem from looks or wealth, but from within, and it haunted him. Each morning, June continued her gentle rituals, watering the small potted succulents she'd arranged on the terrace, leaving fresh coffee for the staff, humming softly as she read in the sunroom. And each time Hayden watched her, from the other side of the room or behind a half-open door, he saw her not as the woman from the bet, but as someone whose soul had challenged everything he thought he knew about beauty and strength. One morning, Hayden walked into the kitchen to find June baking. Her hands were dusted with flour, her cheeks rosy from the oven's heat. The smell of cinnamon filled the space. "You know," she said without looking up, "there's something oddly comforting about kneading dough, like the world makes a little more sense when you're working with your hands." Hayden leaned against the doorway, captivated. "I've never baked a day in my life," he admitted. June looked up, smiling. "Then today's your lucky day. Grab an apron, Mr. Millionaire." And for the next hour, Hayden fumbled through measuring sugar, rolling dough, and laughing at his own mistakes. It was the first time in years he felt real. That afternoon, he sat by the window with June, eating fresh cinnamon rolls and sipping tea. Their conversation drifted from trivial to personal. "You've changed, Hayden," she said, watching him. He nodded. "I feel it. It's like waking up from a long sleep." She smiled faintly but didn't press. One evening, as thunderclouds gathered above Manhattan, Hayden received a call from his mother, Eleanor. She rarely called him unless something was wrong. He answered quickly. "Hayden, darling, I heard about the incident with your friends, and about June." His chest tightened. "What about her?" "She's not our kind of people, Hayden. I raised you better than this. The media's already whispering. You have a legacy to protect." "Mother," he said calmly but firmly, "June is the best thing to happen to me in a long time." "So it's true," Eleanor said, her voice sharp. "You've fallen for her." Hayden didn't respond. "She's using you, Hayden. Women like her always have an angle." That sentence pierced through him like a blade, but instead of backing down, Hayden stood taller. "If you ever met her, you'd know how wrong you are." And for the first time, he ended the call on his mother. That night, June heard the front door slam. Hayden walked past her in a whirlwind, his face pale and jaw tight. Without a word, he went into his office and shut the door. June, sensing the storm within him, waited. After an hour, she gently knocked. "Come in," he said, voice quiet. She stepped in to find him sitting in the dark, only the city lights illuminating his face. June crossed the room and sat across from him. "Bad day?" she asked softly. He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. I had to cut someone off today. Someone important. Because they spoke about you like you weren't worthy. June's eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. The truth is, he continued, you've done something no one else ever could. You've made me care deeply, not because you tried to impress me, but because you never did. A tear slid down his cheek. June reached across the table, gently placing her hand over his. In the silence, something changed. The game was over. The bet was a ghost now. All that remained was the truth neither of them could deny. Later that week, Hayden did something unimaginable. He called a press conference. Under the gleam of cameras and the murmurs of the crowd, Hayden stepped to the podium, dressed simply, no designer logos, no flash. "Good evening," he began, eyes steady. "I'm not here tonight as the CEO of Marshall Holdings. I'm here as a man who made a terrible mistake." Gasps rippled through the room. "Months ago, I agreed to a cruel bet, a challenge made at a party, meant to amuse a group of entitled men. I was to marry a woman who didn't fit society's definition of beauty. Her name is June Delaney." Photographers leaned in. "What began as a shallow act became the most transformative experience of my life. Because June is more than beautiful. She is brilliant, brave, kind, and she taught me more about character and resilience than anyone I've ever known." He paused. "I'm ashamed of who I was, but I'm not ashamed of who I'm becoming, and I owe that to her." The next day, the headlines exploded. Social media buzzed with commentary. Some condemned him, others praised him. But most were curious. Who was June Delaney? Back at the mansion, June watched the news with tears in her eyes. She hadn't known about the press conference. Hayden had done it on his own, without seeking credit. That night, as he came home, she met him at the door. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I did," he replied, "because I couldn't keep hiding, not from the world, and not from you." She looked into his eyes, now unguarded, vulnerable. "So what happens now?" she asked. He took her hand. "Now, we write our story for real." And for the first time since their unusual union began, they kissed. Not out of obligation, not out of curiosity, but from a place of truth. They were no longer pretending. The headlines hit like a thunderstorm. Millionaire Hayden Cross publicly apologizes to wife over viral marriage bet scandal. News anchors debated the sincerity of his words. Commentators speculated if this was just a PR move. But behind the camera flashes and breaking news banners, there was a woman sitting in silence, watching it all unfold from the small kitchen of her modest apartment. Lena, the woman at the center of it all. She hadn't spoken to Hayden since the press conference. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages, calls, interview offers. She ignored them all. What the world didn't know was that her silence wasn't indifference. It was heartbreak. Because even though she never asked for fame, even though she never wanted a millionaire husband, a part of her had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, Hayden had changed. That maybe the spark she felt when he watched her dance in the kitchen, when he listened to her read aloud from her favorite books, when he laughed at her terrible jokes, was real. But how could she trust a man who married her for a bet? She replayed the moment over and over. That night, the whispered conversation between Hayden and his old college friend. She was never supposed to matter. It was just a game. The betrayal stung like fire. Meanwhile, across town, Hayden sat in a conference room surrounded by lawyers and executives. Every one of them had the same goal: control the damage. Release a follow-up statement. Offer to donate to body positivity charities. Ask Lena to do a joint interview. But Hayden sat still, eyes fixed on the polished surface of the table. The room buzzed around him, but he was far away. His mind replayed the look on Lena's face when she left. She hadn't cried. She didn't yell. She just looked at him as if he was a stranger. And somehow that broke him more than if she had screamed. He stood abruptly, ignoring the protests around him. "No more statements. No more press. I need to go." His car weaved through the late-night city traffic as rain fell in sheets. For the first time in his adult life, Hayden wasn't thinking about image, deals, or outcomes. He was thinking about Lena, about her stubborn kindness, her quiet strength, the way she held herself with grace even when the world tried to belittle her. When he arrived at her building, soaked and shivering, he hesitated at the door. Would she even want to see him? He knocked. Minutes passed. Then the door opened, just a crack. Lena stood behind it, arms crossed, eyes cautious. I know I don't deserve a second chance, Hayden began, voice raw, but I can't keep pretending that life without you is anything but empty. Lena didn't speak. She watched him, rainwater dripping from his coat, eyes searching hers. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is everything. The full story. From the moment it started. I wrote it all down. The bet, the lies, the truth. No lawyers, no spin. Just me. She took it, slowly. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know. You were never the joke, I was. She closed the door without a word. That night, Lena sat at her kitchen table, the paper in front of her, untouched. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Finally, she opened it and read. It wasn't just a confession. It was vulnerability, regret, pages filled with the truth of a man who never knew what it meant to love someone until he lost them. He wrote about how he envied her freedom, how he hated himself for thinking her body made her less worthy, how the moment she left he saw the prison he had built around himself. And then he wrote about the small things, how he missed her humming while she cooked, how he noticed the way she talked to plants like they were people, how she made his world feel safe for the first time in years. By the time she finished, her eyes were filled with tears. The next day, Hayden sat in his office, surrounded by silence. He didn't expect an answer. He didn't expect grace. But he heard a knock, and when he opened the door, Lena stood there. No makeup, no cameras, just her. You want to know what hurt the most? She asked quietly. He nodded. Not the bet, not even the humiliation. It was that I let myself believe you saw me, the real me, and then I found out I was just a dare. Hayden swallowed hard. You were never just a dare, but I understand if that's how it felt. I came to tell you the truth, not to ask for anything. Lena took a deep breath. Then hear this. I don't want an apology. I want to see who you become after this. Hayden was stunned. If you want to fix what you broke, don't do it for me. Do it because the man you were is not the man the world needs, or the one you need to be. And with that, she left. But this time something stayed between them. A thread of possibility. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to begin again. Hayden stepped into the apartment quietly, the silence hanging in the air like fragile glass. He saw her, Lena, standing by the window, bathed in the afternoon light, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. In his hands was a small wooden box, and in that box, the future, or the end of it. I had it all planned out, he began softly. I thought I could fix this with a gesture, or a speech, something grand. But the truth is, there's no fixing what I broke. There's only starting over, with honesty. She turned slowly, her gaze steady. What's in the box? Hayden placed it gently on the table and opened it. Inside were legal papers, sealed envelopes, and a brass key. My resignation from the board. I transferred my shares in Dynavex to the nonprofit you founded, the one helping women recover from emotional abuse and body image trauma. She blinked. That's millions. It's yours, he said simply. And this, he handed her the key, is for the cottage you always dreamed of. It's already built, in Montana. You can go there. Stay, heal, or, he paused, you can stay here, with me, but only if you want to. She stared at the key, then back at him. And what exactly would I be staying for? He didn't hesitate. Not a bet, not a title, just love. She took a slow breath and walked past him, disappearing into the hallway. He stood frozen, uncertain. When she returned, she was holding a small envelope. My letter, she said, handing it to him. I wrote it the night I found out the truth. I never gave it to you because I wasn't sure you deserved it. Hayden opened it with trembling hands. Her handwriting stared back at him, calm and fierce. Hayden, the night I learned the truth, I didn't cry because you hurt me. I cried because I had allowed myself to believe someone could love me, not despite who I am, but because of it. You broke that illusion. But somehow, you also helped me find it again. This isn't forgiveness, not yet, but it is hope. Tears filled his eyes. He dropped the letter, not carelessly but reverently, as if it had become too sacred for his hands to hold. Then she smiled, softly, Barely. But it was enough. In the days that followed, they began again, slowly, carefully. There were no declarations of love, no late-night confessions, just simple things. He made coffee the way she liked it. She folded his sweaters without asking. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, reading in silence. The space between them, once cold, began to warm. Hayden no longer tried to control anything. He let the days come and go without expectations. And then one night, Lena walked in and handed him an envelope. "What's this?" he asked. She smiled. "An invitation." He opened it. "Hayden Elias King, you are formally invited to the wedding of Lena Grace Morales and Hayden Elias King. Date, 1 year from today. Location, the meadow behind the Montana cottage. Attire, whatever makes you feel like the man I fell in love with. RSVP required. But I have a feeling you'll say yes." He looked up at her, stunned. She winked. "Better start writing your vows." In the year that followed, everything changed. They moved to the cottage in Montana, far from the flashing cameras, far from the city's endless noise. Hayden sold off most of his empire and poured his wealth into causes Lena believed in. Trauma recovery, youth mentorship, community wellness. They planted vegetables, cooked over fire, adopted a rescue dog, took long walks and even longer naps, and slowly, day by day, love returned. But this time it wasn't glittery or loud. It was quiet, sacred, steady. And then, on a snowy Tuesday morning, Lena threw up. They stared at the pregnancy test together, neither speaking. When it turned positive, Hayden sank to his knees, tears falling freely. Lena joined him on the floor, and for the first time neither of them needed words. They were building a life together, not because of a bet, but in spite of it. 1 year later, beneath a canopy of wildflowers in a quiet meadow, Hayden waited in a linen shirt and bare feet. Lena walked barefoot too, in a simple cream dress that hugged her belly gently. Their guests were few, the woman from the non-profit, a young couple from town, a midwife, a childhood friend. No media, no spectacle, just love. "I vow," Hayden said softly, holding her hands, "to never again confuse ambition with arrogance, or power with love. I vow to remember the sound of your laugh when you dance in the kitchen, to never let a single day go by without thanking the universe for giving me another chance." Lena smiled through tears. "And I vow to hold you accountable," she said, "but also to hold you close, to trust you again, even when it's hard, and to raise this child with grace and fire." They kissed, and the wind caught the edges of her veil like a blessing. Months later, when their daughter was born, they named her Hope, because that's what had saved them. Not forgiveness, not even love, but hope. The belief that broken things can be mended, that people can grow, that stories can change, and that sometimes the worst beginnings can lead to the most beautiful ends. So tell us, if you were in Lena's shoes, would you have given Hayden a second chance? And if you were Hayden, could you have walked away from power for love? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories like this right here on Wow Family Story. Because every family has a story, and every story deserves a voice.